discussion on the Treaty of Versailles, circa 1918.
It was it just goes without saying, a highly significant historical event, one which remains hotly debated, to which I suppose it opens up another very, very hot, very tense question of to what degree do we punish the perpetrators of crime in a war, especially when that leads to far greater crimes from the same perpetrators.
Exactly. It was all the sort of hubris of the French and English empires that would not listen to Woodrow.
The French head of state's moustache was so suffocating at those proceedings.
Though Woodrow was the first globalist conspiracist, so take what you want. The Onion owns InfoWars now. Everything's up for grabs.
Yeah, and you can get your InfoWars print edition via Awesome Express. Now, the Route of All Evil. Now, I guess I would consider this if say you or I would have discussions just casually. What are the weakest Futurama episodes? Say, meaning the first 4 seasons.
Yeah.
The two that come up are Leela of Her Own and this one.
Yeah.
And Leela of Her Own is typically considered was the weaker episode when there was just 4 seasons. It was actually considered the weaker episode of the show, from what I understood. I knew this before I ever saw the show, based upon something I saw on some fan website.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but yeah, Route of All Evil. Here's my thing. It's not. If I had to identify the major flaw / weakness of the Route of All Evil, it's not very interesting. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I used to think it was a lot worse than what it was, just rewatching it again. But not to say that I really liked it or anything. I was just moderately entertained. But like you said, there are moments, especially once it's in the middle, just so much filler and nothing interesting is going on. So while it's not a terrible episode, in a way, maybe Leela of Her Own is more entertaining because it's just a bit more oddball. But it's also got moments that are just completely outside the realm of what Futurama normally is. Whereas, this is just a sort of plodding along in a way. We're it used to really piss me off when I was younger, when you say you're just watching it on TV and you're like, oh, Futurama, there's going to be a good episode on tonight, and then that comes on.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You can't just watch another episode. It spoils the sort of...
That's the thing, and that's why... That's probably the main reason why these 2 episodes gravitate to weakest, just because those are the 2 which you'd feel the most... I guess too strong a word, but dread when they were coming on. If you didn't know it was necessarily going to be on the schedule in the reruns. Because I can think of other weaker episodes of the first 4 seasons, for instance, ones we've gone through thus far, like Fry and the Sloan Factory and The Honking. You wouldn't necessarily, at least when I was younger, be miffed if they were coming on, because there's something of a novelty in the Bender Ware car, and Fly and the Sloan Factory has some funny moments, particularly near the start. It's got a season 1 charm as well.
Yeah.
And another one that comes a bit later in the show called Kif Gets Knocked Up a Notch, and Spanish Fry actually, which I also tend to consider weaker episodes of the first 4 seasons. I wouldn't be as disappointed if those were coming on television either.
Yeah.
Even though I think those are flawed episodes and they're just kind of not unfunny episodes in their own way. But we'll get to those, and maybe my opinion will change to some extent when I do watch them. That has actually tended not really to happen on this. I know Futurama well enough that I don't think there's an episode in this, right? Maybe the Earth Stood Stupid actually quite recently, where I was a bit because I never loved that episode, and I was kind of honing in on why, even though I always liked it. I probably liked honing in on it, made me like it slightly less possibly. But I still appreciate it. No Futurama episode is unwatchable, you know what I mean? And sometimes I feel like if you're listening to this retrospective and we're criticizing, making some critiques of half the episodes of the show, you might be thinking, you claim to love the show so much, but you've got a lot of negative things to share about it occasionally. I was like, well, but that's kind of why I love it so much, that you kind of just nitpick it effectively, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
None of this is what I would have felt when I was first watching the show. Mind you, I was in primary school then.
And no one would be surprised dismissing this episode either. This isn't a fan favourite.
Well, that's exactly... For this one, that's very true, but sometimes I think... I could imagine, I know Season 2 seems to be very beloved, so I can imagine some people being like, oh, what's your problem with some of those episodes? They're nice enough, aren't they? Kind of goofy sitcom plots. That's kind of my thing. I prefer Futurama exploring its potential rather than just doing the it's a sitcom, but it's in the future, and because it's always at this weird tension anyway, where it's like kind of forcing itself into 20th century sitcom parameters, but it's sort of like, you know, that they're then having like these obnoxious sort of overbearing sci-fi elements which sort of distract you from that anyway. Like it can be, Bioscope's built for two stuff, which is a pretty good episode, but you know, there's a sort of, I don't know.
Come to think of it, this episode, do you reckon it might have the initial idea might have been the subplot, the Bender giving birth to beer thing, and then they might have like tried to scale an episode around that, but then realized that wouldn't be enough, and potentially had like Awesome Express as like a subplot, so they had to scale that up into a main plot.
Yeah, well, they eventually sort of made that episode the subplot of Bender brewing the beer and bend her when he becomes a woman. Because that's almost a similar idea, him giving birth, you know, I mean, how he talks in this episode.
Yeah, but that's like a Futurama Simpsons moment. That's like more comedic. That's really how he can like scam the Olympics. That's like Lady Ballers or something. That was like prophetic.
But yeah, like, I mean...
This one's more like, I don't know, he's Ripley in Aliens, and the beer is like the little kid from Aliens everyone loves for some reason.
Newt. Other people don't like Newt.
Good.
I mean, I don't mind Newt personally. I don't think...
People are always like, oh, that's a great character. And I'm like, what? I guess they just like Ripley.
Yeah, like I remember I'd often be, when I was on the internet when I was younger, I was very aware on like forums and stuff, people thought Newt was just screaming all the time. Like it was really Scott or something. Some of the boys you saw at the time were very annoyed at the character.
Like the little kid in Road Warrior as well.
Oh, I love that kid. Feral Kid's great.
Feral Kid's okay.
Feral Kid's great.
They're not quite Anakin Skywalker level of...
Jake Lloyd.
Yeah.
That wasn't that great. Yeah, well, speaking of Star Wars, one of the great visual gags in the history of this show is this space slug's appearance, you know, from Empire.
Oh, yeah.
This particular
pops up in this episode. Yeah, this episode has a few of those.
But and this is how a Star Wars reference ought to be done, because a lot of times people's Star Wars references in these shows, they go on for too long, or they're a little too, like, an obvious reference, like, oh, hey, look, a lightsaber, oh, look, Darth Vader, but, like, in this, it's just, like, a reference to something that, like, people who've seen Star Wars more than once will get, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just like something that like the casual fans or the people who haven't even seen it.
I always thought that like,
cool like that.
Season 12 or 13 episode of The Simpsons with Mark Hamill.
Oh sure, yeah.
Where it's like use the forks.
Yeah, stuff like that. You know, it's
there's
like
so much of that in Star Wars pop culture references.
Yeah, Family Guy's really bad with it, obviously.
Oh, they did 3 whole movies.
They're hard to watch. But you know, the thing is, it's like, because it's just like, hey guys, Star Wars, and it's like, we've seen Star Wars a lot. Like, there's other movies you can reference, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you do reference a film that like is less expected, it is kind of just like, oh my god, are they actually going there? It's funny, you know. If you want to go for a laugh, do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have to rely on references for laughs, it's just sort of a lazy strategy anyway. But if you have to, I don't know. Anyway, somewhat, if I had to praise something about the episode, I guess it's like a somewhat wholesome like little like message they've got here. Like it's not it's not like, oh sorry everyone, it's not like it's like some it's like a completely nothing, like Little of Her Own. There is no message, there's nothing there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There's literally...
That's the part I like of that episode, though, is that it is just like...
What is the point?
Yeah, it's so, like, just sort of, like, sarcastic in that sense. Similar to maybe, like, that episode of South Park where they end up with the, you know, the panda thing.
Oh, sexual harassment panda?
Yeah.
That's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Well, that, like, makes no sense.
We don't take kindly to people who don't take kindly.
Yeah, that whereas this one...
take kindly to you.
This one does have a sort of, by the book, like, Wonder Years sort of, like, sitcom, you know, wholesome thing. It's not terrible. Though, now that you mention it, probably my favourite part of the episode is initially when... the professor and Hermes try to sabotage their
that's
business.
great.
It's just like, welcome to the world of business.
No, because that's fantastic, because it's right. They're just like, oh, well, good to fellow business owners. Hey, because, you know, you hear stories about, like, Murdoch and Packer, like, sending goons and thugs to just destroy each other's stands back in the, you know, when it's just all just being handed out by people on the street. You know, like, I've read this, you know.
Sure, yeah, they just destroy their little pop-ups.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be friendly with each other now, but, you know, this is back in, like, the 50s, 60s, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I maybe that is one thing I did always enjoy about this episode is the way that like
Stops
yeah,
everyone,
Hermes
yeah.
and the professor kind of act like Roald Dahl characters,
Ha!
they're like kids, you know. They're just like making fun of them and like belittling them and stuff. I guess that's just so the when they succeed more, you know, the sort of, they have an actual comeuppance or whatever. But yeah, it works in the sitcom sense, or at least in the Futurama, like you know, hyper overplayed on the sitcom, like you know, tropes sort of thing.
Yeah. I don't have much else to share here.
Yeah, neither. It's
I mean, we've
not-
made 10 minutes.
I'm
so that's
scraping the
fine.
barrel to come up with that. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's pretty a dull episode.
And another one where we, I guess, like the subplot more. The subplot's not amazing, but it's watchable. It's likable. Bender going through those emotional cycles is quite fascinating and funny.
Oh yeah, and the beer looks delicious too. The Bender brow.
Well, thanks everyone.